I'm
That's
excited to
right.
talk with you and Melissa here later too. I cannot wait to see what y'all have cooked up with the
Yeah,
show.
I wanna. We'll definitely go over that because like, what the hell? There's some sort of helicopter going around. ICE was raiding my local Home Depot this morning. Um,
Jesus, of course they were,
of course they were. Yeah, so they're fucking doing that. Got an alert.
because Home Depot is where all of the most hardened of illegal immigrant criminals just hang out at.
Yep.
All those hardened criminals just
Yep.
love hanging out at Home Depot and
Yep.
just putting
Because
themselves
they.
out there going like, hey, give me some work. Give me some work.
Yeah. Literally, dude. Like I mean,
Like,
I've literally worked
fuck.
with those guys, man. They're not fucking criminals.
No, and that's fucking stupid. Like, what the hell?
I guess
Um,
someone's running around with a weapon. And the helicopter is like,
Interesting.
what a morning. What a morning. Some dude, some drunk driver hit the power box over like on my street. So there's no power. So I spent the morning rigging up a bunch of extension cords through my house so that I could hook everything up to a solar panel so that I could work today. Um, so it's just like we just had to keep figuring it out, but we did it. I mean, I'm sitting here, I'm using the power of the sun. We're using the power of the sun to power the Firebrand project today. So it's pretty cool. So hello everybody, good morning, welcome to the dialogue. Let me close the window. He's screaming. I get it. My door's locked, dude. No, and my garage door isn't even open. Oh my
He's
god, they're
back.
flying over
He's
my
leaving.
house.
He's
Some
back.
some some dude is running around armed. So yeah, if I have to get up and you see me like running around with like a machete in my house on the camera, it's because some armed dude is in my house. But anyway, everybody, welcome to the dialogue. Obviously, John Oliver is not with us today. He's a little sick, so my good friend Nick Paro is always coming to the rescue, always stepping in
Shane,
with
are
that
we
beautiful beard.
live on
Um,
Substack? Oh, there we are.
yeah,
There
we're
we
here.
are. I
Um,
found us.
yes,
God, they
today
make it so hard to find.
Today we're going to be talking about socialism because, I'm sick of watching Mike Johnson use the word socialism, then Marxism, then communism in three sentences. You have these people straight up lying, lying through their teeth about something they clearly don't understand. And it's getting to a point where, my personal belief is I think this could be a year of the dark horse. I think that Zora Mamdani is there, and I think that I am a card-carrying member now of the Democratic Socialists of America. It exists. It's not like there's not infrastructure out there to join. You could go and sign up today. They do have the infrastructure to put someone on the ballot. We're not talking about some abstract thing that doesn't exist. We're talking about a real tangible opportunity that we have. And I think Americans have been looking for something different. So, what I want to do today
Yeah.
with Nick is talk about democratic socialism. And democratic socialism is not the same as socialism or a social democracy. There is a lot of different things going into this. So we're going to talk about where did capitalism come from? Where did socialism come from? What are the kind of core aspects of socialism? Difference with communism, like means of production. We're just going to talk about it all. And me and Nick, as we talk here, we're going to point out some things that we see now today, and just have an open, an honest discussion about what that really is, what that means, and I'm really looking forward to it. So, Nick, thank you for stepping in last minute, brother. It's great to see you.
Yeah. No problem. I'm glad I could come in. I'm glad I could hang out. Um, and it's going to be a fun show. I've been talking a little bit about uh, socialized democracies and socialistic systems this morning with Melissa Corrigan. And actually with Dana and Lawrence too on Gen XE when I was on their show this morning.
Hmm,
Um, so it's good to see y'all. Good to be here. And thanks for having me on, Shane.
absolutely.
Because there's a lot of lies and bullshit going around. You know.
Yeah.
I'm sickest of this shit, and we gotta push back. So
I couldn't agree
let's go
more.
do it.
Yeah. So, like, before we even start, I think talking about socialism, people say, like, what is capitalism? Who created capitalism? So, no one actually created capitalism. In fact, the first time you start to see like a mention of capitalism is from Karl Marx. When he's referring to the capitalist. So the catalyst for capitalism is usually referred to, say, 18th century Scottish philosopher Adam Smith. He wrote The Wealth of Nations. And he talks about, this system of natural liberty where individuals pursuing their own self-interests are going to be guided by this invisible hand, which will lead them to do the right thing with their wealth. I mean, like, again, he's a philosopher though, right? Like, this is the thing. Like, when we philosophize, like, that's part of the Firebrand Project. That's part of everything that, I do here. It's built on philosophy. That's what the dialogue is. It's about having a dialogue. It's about having those thoughts. And in terms of, the system itself, what this person, Evie Skateboard, you're going off in the chat. I don't even know what you're talking about, and it's distracting me. Hold on. Are
It,
they okay? Yeah, there's some sort of bot here, conservative. So you know what? If you want to stay and I can pick apart your argument, go ahead, because you're exactly the person that is you're going to look really stupid by the end of this podcast. So stick around. If that's what you're going on about, and if I'm wrong in that, I apologize. But it seems to me like you're talking about, I don't know what you're going on about. So
yeah, yeah. I'm
anyway,
not gonna respond.
yeah. So we're talking about the wealth of nations. We're talking about philosophers. We're talking about ideals, right? And ideally, people do the right thing, right?
Ideally, but
Exactly.
his like we've seen throughout time that that's not true. The ideal is not the human condition. The human condition is often greed. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
so, yeah, ideally, yes, a lot of us want the ideal, um, but definitely not ideal anymore.
Yeah.
um, we're
And the
we're
words he
we're
used to
seeing the
describe
bad
the
part of
system.
it.
Yeah.
Sorry, yeah,
No, go ahead. So the words he used to describe our definition of capitalism was a commercial society. Okay, so this is a transactional society, right? That's what it is. So the assumption that commerce and wealth generated through commerce is going to give, these people that who are going to ideally do the right thing. But like Nick said, I mean, ideals and reality are different. And I think if there's one truth at the core of my philosophy, of my musings, or whatever you want to call it, is that greed governs all. And the only
yes,
way a society survives is through the regulation of greed specifically.
yeah,
And we see that because it's not that you could have 99% of people who want to do the right thing, but the 1% will exploit that other 99% at the cost of their well-being and their health, because there you go, right? Like that's in their interest, right? And so
yeah,
a commercial society leads to that outcome regardless, because you have a 1%. And look at what we have. There's a 1%. So
yeah,
that is philosophically, we say, okay, well, greed is a thing in the best interest of people. It doesn't matter, because ultimately just those musings, just those ideas of thinking, well, someone's going to take advantage, we can point to reality and see a 1% has emerged. The same continues, but who is Karl Marx and what was he really arguing? And this is, like, again, I watched Mike Johnson after Mamdani get elected.
We cannot allow these Marxists and these communists to take over our country. You don't even what the fuck.
You're like, you know what, dude, shut the fuck up, because you can't use three different types, three different words like they mean the same thing in a single sentence. They're just gaslighting you, right? So if they're going to try and gaslight people, let me and Nick today arm you with the real information to combat that. Because the next time someone says, well, they're communist, well, actually, that's not the case at all.
Yeah, and that being said, I do want to also be careful when we use the word communist. Not careful. I want to be deliberate when we use the word communist, because Melissa Corrigan and I were having a discussion before we go any further about this. I want to talk to you about a group that we, since we're on this track, is the Refuse Fascism group that Melissa had started partnering with for Counterstory Media. Their original parent group is the Revolutionary Communist Party of America, which is a very radical organization in this country. And they, at the same time, they're one of the only groups out there that is building for like sustained engagement and sustained movement. So one of the things Melissa and I are doing is being very deliberate in learning who and what organizations found and like are partnered with or are like the parents of some of these groups. So we found a different one that we can talk about later too, in terms of like how socialism applies to like citizen-led movements and things like that, and pressuring the economy. But we just want to be careful with certain groups, because we found out that Refuse Fascism might not be exactly who they started out and say they are, or advertise in any way that they had a history of being related to.
That's a great point. Like, and so you actually see this a lot, where you see a lot of communist movements start as socialist movements and they transition, because ultimately, like I've said this a lot, communism ends in autocracy, so does capitalism. Okay. Yes. Oligarchy on both sides. It doesn't matter, because we're talking about greed here. So whenever you centralize anything, you're going to have an autocracy, which is one of those things where what is, just because Marx was the first person to use the term capitalism, because he was talking about it when he was critiquing capitalists, because he was really focused on the means of production, the modes of production. Okay. So how things work in an economy. That's what he was trying to solve. He was trying to figure out, how do you get a society, an economy that works? And he was thinking about it. He was putting ideas out there, and where he landed is this idea that, you need to have, you need to diversify ownership of core things in our society, specifically the modes and the means of production. That means the property of natural resources. Nick, you've talked about this with AI. AI is the same thing, whereas AI needs to be collectively owned so that people cannot profit. The big thing about socialism...
Well, so that all people can profit and
Correct.
Not just few people can profit, because AI could literally feed the foundations of a universal basic income, universal taxpayer funded healthcare, education, all of it. Literally could fund all of it.
Well, that alone, we could go even farther and say just about every single industry could do that. Because if you take out the for-profit aspect, but that doesn't mean, like, again, and we'll get into this a little bit more, but it's not that Marx never even said that capitalism was evil. He said that in a certain sense, it really worked. However, ultimately, it is builds a system of exploitation where you have more and more seeking for profit, and you have labor, and it ultimately ends up contradicting itself, which is what we saw, right? We saw that contradiction. John is here, and hey, what's going on, John? I know I know you're sick, man, but thanks for popping in. We are seeing now that real exploitation. It's real time. And, my term I like to use is late stage capitalism. That's the term I like to use, because I think early stage capitalism is more resemblant of what a, democratic socialist system would be, because you just have access. You do, in a certain sense, have public ownership of the means of productions, just because you have a large enough market. that people are able to participate in that sense. It's where those critiques come in of capitalists, of the exploitation, where you start to see that late stage transition into an oligarchy. Do you have any thoughts on that, Nick?
Well, I think too that could be broken down. Like I'm looking at some of the more like subtle differences on the spectrum of socialism in some of it. So we've got a couple different types of socialism that early stage capitalism is more like market socialism. To me, it sounds like it's a blend of social ownership with a market based economy where state owned enterprises compete with each other, basically. Well, no, let's rethink that. I think you're right. Democratic socialism is the start, but we're at market socialism. I think maybe democratic socialism can be where it starts at.
Yeah,
Um, at least in America, that's our philosophy on socialism is more on the democratic socialism, where it only combines minor socialist principles on the government side, and the rest is really on cooperatives owned and run by the public through
here, I'll
trade
be right back,
unions.
Nick. There's something going on in my house. It's like super loud. I'll be
Okay.
right back.
Yeah. Okay. Keep your microphone on, brother. Don't get don't do anything nuts. So I'm going to go into this while we're on an interlude without Shane today here on the dialogue. Let's talk about some different types of socialism specifically, and we'll start with democratic socialism versus social democracy. Oh, Shane is back. He did not die.
We're good. It was just
Good.
my the garage, the power's out, and my father-in-law was going through the inside of the house to get his
Oh,
golf
okay.
golf bag out. I was like, dudes, I feel, because I was telling you guys earlier, some dudes running around with a knife,
Mm.
and I hear someone rummaging around in my house, and I'm like, are you fucking kidding me? I have to go fight an intruder right now.
Get your swords off the wall. Get your
That's why we
nunchucks. Do
keep
your
it there.
thing.
Yeah,
Yeah.
cut the zip
Just
ties.
walk down the stairs with a sword over your shoulder. Hey, what's up, man?
Absolutely.
Um, we're going into the subtle differences of socialism as you left, and the big one I wanted to talk about was democratic socialism versus like social democracy, and where we see capitalism starting. Like early capitalism, in our view, was democratic socialism, which is mostly public owned things or mostly cooperative, worker run cooperatives, labor unions, guilds, things like that. The Masons, groups, organizations like that in early America helped found capitalism through a democratic socialist society. That's what we are. We're built on a democratic socialist society of trade unions and labor unions and guilds, like I just said, and slaves who became then parts of trade unions and labor unions and guilds and helped build a cooperative network. We have a lot of co-ops in this country because that's democratic socialism. Europeans started capitalism on a slightly different side of socialism through social democracy or through social monarchies. And so their state of socialism started in a different point than ours. Ours started in, I think, much more conservative in a lot of ways than Europe. We've always been more conservative leaning as a country overall in our philosophy. And I think that's viewed how we view capitalism as very ruthless and conservative, and Wild West and early capitalism to us is democratic socialism in a lot of ways, at least in my opinion. What do you think
Yeah,
of that?
no, and I mean, I think you're right in a lot of ways, and one of the things we'll talk about later, is the distinction between democratic socialism and social democracy, because there's a lot of nuance, and one is not the same as the other. The way society is structured, the ideas of how it's structured, are obscured. They don't teach you what they are in school. You're not going to get this in an education. Like, they're not going to explain to you all these different things. And if it isn't a textbook, it's one paragraph, right, that you're never going to remember. And so there's four big definitions here. um, that I'm gonna give you. So there's laissez-faire capitalism, which is very simple. That's what we got here. We've got private ownership of production, profit maximization, free markets. That's it. Okay, like that's how it works. There is no, wiggle room. The regulation is only to really keep that those ideals there. Okay, you have socialism. Socialism as itself, okay, is a very theoretical concept because while it exists, it needs guidance. It needs guidance. It needs structure. And I've long thought that for socialism to work, you need a hybrid system. You need to have a little bit of everything sprinkled in there because what it really is at its core is collective ownership of production. The other big thing is production for use, not profit. You make what you need, and everyone contributes within that circle to meet the needs of a society. And that doesn't necessarily mean that you can't have all the things we have now. Doesn't mean you can't have your own company. It doesn't mean
Hmm.
you can't do all of these things. Doesn't mean you can't be within a market. I think that's one of the things too where there's a lot of misconceptions. They're telling you, well, if you do that, if socialism happens, you'll never make a dime in your life. It's all gonna, and it's like, well, that's not true. We need to say it's obviously, and the use of something called democratic planning, where you have guardrails in place, guides, so that when you are in this system of capitalism, if you have a capitalist or a for-profit system, you're able to make sure that you don't have anything go too far. One of the things that socialism in general really goes to combat is passive income. You shouldn't have people who don't contribute to society making and hoarding lots of money. You are never going to convince me that someone who makes $50 million a day doing jack shit and raping kids is somehow benefiting society. That's just not how it works. So
Yeah.
but that's what we see. Okay. So that's what
Yeah.
we're seeing right now. But then they do this shit like Mike Johnson likes to do. He says Marxism, communism, socialism, Marxism, communism. Well, Marx calls communism the higher phase, and it's extremely theoretical, and we know it doesn't work as well because communism is a form of centralization. If you trust a government to fully own something, you will end in an autocracy. What you see in Russia and the
Hmm.
Russian Federation, where, mind you, what Russia is right now is not the Soviet Union. So Soviet Union was communism. Okay. And
Yeah.
that worked horribly because the government owned all the means of production. They put all the people they didn't like in gulags and they used them as slave labor. And then they collapsed upon the own weight of their own dictatorship. Then Russia becomes a capitalist country and you have a rapid oligarchization and autocracy form under Putin. Both Russia shows us and the Soviet Union shows us real time that neither works, right? You have a Stalin and then you have a Putin. Both are the same thing. You saw capitalism and you saw communism. They don't work. We've got plenty of examples. And then you like that the Soviet model like is there is no stateless, there is no government that represents the people wholly if you put the power of the means of production in the hands of a small group, even if that group is the state itself.
Yeah.
What do you think? What do you think about those four things?
I think that's a really good analogy, especially or around Russia and what Putin is doing. And so they like let's take Russia. Let's keep talking into Russia on what happened there too. Is Russia went from state socialism, like fully mandated state socialism, which is which is the basis for communism. It isn't communism itself, but it is the basis for it. It's where the government controls everything, the economy and the means of production, and you're just sort of you're a peon. It became market socialism in a lot of ways, in my opinion, is what Russia became, because that's where they made it appear like they had private ownership and they created an oligarchy class, but it's really a manufactured class of all of those people report directly to and are owned by Putin. So they're still under direct state ownership. They just compete on a public market. So
Right.
it's still state owned enterprises competing directly with one another with no private small business enterprises. And this is where America differed from Russia in a lot of ways, especially around World War II. So after World War II, Russia went towards state socialism. The US went towards social democracy. And what that meant for us was the US encouraged and funded social programs to start small businesses. The amount of home small businesses, mom and pop shops, stores like that, where everybody could own their own business, skyrocketed after World War II because we realized we needed to inject a whole bunch of money into the economy. You're seeing what Canada is doing exactly right now is they're injecting like $2 trillion or something into their economy, knowing it's going to cause debt immediately, but it's going to get paid back because that's what social democracies do is they pay an upfront price for long-term gains. And the US did that. The US did that and started turning ourselves into a social democracy, which is where we got a really strong independent business class where folks like Shane and I could start small businesses like we're doing right now and thrive and succeed. And it wasn't about greed. It wasn't about us. We weren't trying to move up in social status. Like we wouldn't be trying to get to the robber barons, but we would be comfortable. And that's what a social democracy brings
Yeah.
compared to a democratic socialist system, in my opinion, is it brings a level of comfort that democratic socialism does not take care of because you're still relying on the private too much. In democratic socialism with the cooperatives, whereas if you go too far in that other direction with folks like Putin, who, after all of the super oppressive state socialist principles that happened in the USSR after the fall of the Russian Empire, was they had total control of all the economy, the means of production, the means of distribution, and the means of wealth. And then they dispersed it among a small group of people
Yeah.
and turned it into an oligarchy. Whereas we're doing it in the opposite direction. We've done it in the opposite direction for a long time, too. We've always had robber barons in this country. We don't call them all, at least I don't. They've never been called oligarchs here. They're robber barons. They rob us. That's what they are. They're rich assholes who just rob our shit. That's democratic socialism for the wealthy who are trying to create now market socialism in the US because the end goal is authoritarianism, and market socialism is a path to authoritarianism. And
Yeah.
market socialism is how you own this, where you have the illusion of public ownership, where it's still all privately owned, but it's state owned because that's when Peter Thiel and Mark Zuckerberg and Elon Musk become fiefdom leaders and controllers because they happen to have the largest state owned enterprises of, say, X and Meta or SpaceX, which would replace NASA in a lot of ways. That would be a state controlled company under the guise of private ownership because all of the money comes from state appropriated funds anyway. So it's state owned. And it's just market socialism. That's what oligarchs want. That's what robber barons want is market socialism. I think the balance point is social democracy because that's when the people actually have power and a voice. And that's
Yeah.
where
I
Putin
I
fucked up on purpose and Russia fucked up on purpose. And we're fucking up on purpose here too, in a lot of ways. Well, not we, not you and me, but the US government, who is,
yeah.
by the way, actively hiding and covering up pedophilia and child sex trafficking and I think before we end the show today, at some point, we do need to talk about that and how fucked up that is. That
Yeah,
the
we'll
DOJ,
touch on it for sure because we just had these emails come out.
yeah,
You
Michael
know,
Wolf.
so but you really
There's an open call for an interview, Michael Wolf. Come on with me and Ellie Leonard on Banner and Backbone. We'll gladly talk about all of that with you and share all of the information from you. Do it like now. Come on.
Yep.
Let's save this democracy and turn it into a social democracy.
Totally. But you offered a great segue here.
Yeah.
And one of the arguments, against socialism is its state ownership of everything. Well, it's not true at all. Socialism is communism because the state owns everything. That is what, Lenin wanted. Okay. That is what Stalin did. That's not what it is. So there's personal property and there's private property. What socialist systems advocate for is that you have access to all of the personal property that you need to be successful and comfortable. Private property refers specifically to the means of production. That is what that's what creates your personal property. What we see in America is that people cannot afford to have personal property because of private property being the ownership of the means of production. Because you have oligarchs in America, American oligarchs are robber barons, we no longer have access to our personal property. It is harder for you to buy a toothbrush now than it has ever been before. It is harder for you to buy a car than it has ever been before. They
50-year mortgages.
In constant debt. They're offering 50-year mortgages. They're offering 15-year car loans. Why? Because it's slavery. Someone said it in the chat. It's a form of forced indoctrination or forced submission to the public, to the corporate system through debt. But the other big thing here is
at this point, the U.S. system, the whole U.S. system is based on debt. Like that's literally all the U.S. system is about. It's just debt for us so that rich people can borrow our money and spend it on themselves. So market socialism, assholes.
Yeah, well, and
all of them.
Point here with debt. I think debt is going to fucking destroy us. Debt is the nuclear bomb that is going to bomb the entire global economy because the concept of debt, there's nothing wrong with debt. What is wrong with debt is when they decided that they could buy and sell debt as an asset, as a security. Now, the second you give debt value and say, I can use that debt to purchase something else, you've created an arbitrary thing, something that doesn't really exist. It's the same as crypto. Okay. Debt is it's the same thing. I've created something, I'm assigning it value. But the reality is there is no guarantee that debt comes back to you. It's one thing if you want to loan money to someone, okay, and say that eventually you will have to pay me back $1,000 and you have to give me an extra 15. And you can have that debt. Now, what you can't do and what screwed us and what created the oligarchs is someone said, you know what? This debt is worth $1,000, $1,015. What if I just say this is $1,000, $1,015? Suddenly, you have $1,015 that you just created out of nothing. What's even better is interest. So you can loan money and then add that interest. Say, well, now actually it's 10%. So it's $1,100. Okay, but that is nothing. It's arbitrary. And so they've used it to inflate and make more and more money. But there's no money. What we're seeing is there's no money that's going to go back into it. This debt cannot and will not be repaid. And that's what's created this whole situation. And that's what this passive income we're talking about is. By removing passive income, by removing their ability to collect wealth on wealth that doesn't exist, on arbitrary things, it allows us to focus on the means of production, providing personal property to people, to Americans. That's what's more important than having a passive income that allows you not to work and do nothing and continue to siphon wealth out of an economy you're not contributing to.
Yeah. And so I think that's a like the big piece in that is it's a lot of inflated values. It's all fake. It's made up stuff. I think one of the things it's what we're seeing with crypto, like you said, with crypto. It's speculative. It's not based on any real tangible value or any real tangible thing that it's tied to. The US dollar, let's say, just specifically, because I know where I know some of the US dollar history is it used to be backed by gold. We had a Federal Reserve that has a ton of gold in it. We used to hoard wealth in the form of gold bars like dragons. A lot of countries still do that. In fact, we still do that. That was what backed our financial system. And am I saying going back to gold is a good thing? No. Fuck no. I don't want to go back to a rare earth mineral or an earth mineral that we have to mine and destroy our planet to get as a finite resource to say we can have this much greed and more and more and more and more. I I am fine in the long term with systems like crypto. I don't think we're ready for them. I don't think there's any good regulatory like basis in place for crypto right now, and that would provide us any security or safety as the users. And that's what they want is they want it without the safety and security. They want market socialism where they get to make it look like we have any power and any like say in what's going on, say in crypto, where they get to own all of the big whale accounts and all of the big uh, and and change the standards and change the values whenever they want or see fit. um, that doesn't solve the problem. Like it just moves one debt to another. The thing is we could eliminate all the debt because the debt is fake. Like the debt is fake. It's all fake numbers. If we're in debt to if other countries are in debt to us and we're in debt to them too at the same time, who owns what debt? What debt are we paying off? What like are we paying off the money that we borrowed from them, or are they paying off the money they borrowed from us, or are we paying off the money they borrowed from us by paying them money we borrowed from them? Like it's confusing as fuck sounding because that's what it is.
Yeah.
Because it doesn't make sense.
Mhm.
It's stupid. It's monopoly money that they have decided is here's how you're going to run the world is we're going to make you believe that your value is worth what us small few. And yeah, it's always been a lot like that. There's always been a small few that control the markets, and any sort of market in any sort of history throughout civilization, the powerful always dominate the markets. It is the 1% of the 1%. Like Shane, you talked about it earlier in at the beginning of all of this was like it's a 99% want to do good. That 1% will take advantage of the system.
Mhm.
That 1% who we see right now as billionaires, there's 1% of them that are fucking it over for the rest of us. Like we see the most obnoxious 1% of the 1%. Um, that said, that small group are the big dragons that have created market socialism on a global scale and are manipulating global economies to not only destabilize the US. I know this is kind of a bit of a tangent on this, but this whole market socialism system is a destabilizing mechanism that is being implemented around the world right now. Like they talk, somebody was talking about it either earlier today or yesterday, that, and I remember vividly hearing this discussion. Is it's three power players of Xi, um, Putin, and Trump, who are divvying up the world into market socialism systems, basically, where they would get to control their segments. So the US would control North and South America, Russia would control Europe and parts of Africa, maybe. Israel would get all of Africa and Israel and the Middle East, and China would get Asia and the South Pacific. Um, And those would become fiefdoms of market socialism, where just a small group of people would own all the wealth, and the rest of us would work slave labor for them. Basically, that's what that is,
Yeah.
and that's what their runaround seems to be, because that's what we're seeing in provocation to like um, Venezuela. That's part of this movement towards destabilization and market socialism for the very ultra wealthy.
Yeah. No, I mean, and you're. I think you nailed it. I mean, and that's where I think when we look at, I think you have kind of it's difficult too, because when you look at democratic socialism versus, a social democracy. Okay, so this is where kind of you and me maybe differ a little bit. I think a social democracy is not necessarily the transition we can have right away. I don't think that is. I think it can happen ultimately, but I think that to transition, I think that if you go to democratic socialism, that's the first step. To your point, there is limitations, right? Because you're still allowing a certain type of market to exist within democratic socialism. Now, the change is that you have regulation. It's the crux of it is you regulate the shit out of that market, and you say, I don't want you to be able to do all of the things that you're doing, because the thing is, you can have, I do think, like we talked about earlier, there's good parts of capitalism, right? Early stage
Yeah.
capitalism is kind of like it is a social democracy without the guide rails, because we have to look at these things for what they are. They're systems, and systems have stages, they have phases, they have components, they have forces. When you act upon a system, you see change. You could even make it as simple as saying it's a chemical, equation. Okay, you add hydrogen and you add oxygen, you get water. Okay, you add hydrogen, you add oxygen, you add energy, water. Okay, why? Because that's how it works. You could say the same thing. You add a population, you add a working class, you add labor, you add a output, and you have some form of a system. Now, it's the forces that are acting upon that system that matters. And when you have, a runaway reaction on a, social democracy with a lack of guardrails, you end up entering a, market socialism, like you said.
Yeah.
Where you have a
And this is where regulation comes in importance. And you
regulation.
and I have talked about it a lot before.
You and me have talked about regulation a lot. The fucking answer is regulation. Like, it's that simple. And that's what democratic socialism is. It's people transition to a kind of social democracy through a government, through reclaiming their government and passing laws to regulate. And that's where I think we have an opportunity with Zoran Mamdani, because he is a democratic socialist endorsed candidate. So to be clear, the Democratic Socialists of America is a like a nonprofit, that like an organization that backs candidates that are democratic socialist in value. So I donate to that because I want them to help these candidates like they did with Zoran Mamdani. So where's the line? It's kind of just like a stepping stone, I think, is the better way, because if you get to democratic socialism, you can reach social democracy. That's what socialism is, I think, more than anything else, is you're looking at a spectrum. You're looking at different parts, and it can go back and forth, because what it is it's when you reach equilibrium, a societal equilibrium. I think that's kind of when I look into their philosophy and what they're doing. And you could say, okay, it works in New York City, doesn't work in Tulsa. Well,
but why not? Why wouldn't it work?
Why wouldn't it work? Why wouldn't it? Like, if you're going to say that, I would love for you to bring that up, because if you're looking at a democratic socialism on a federal system, okay, Now you're looking at the balance. Okay, if you're all Americans, if the people in Tulsa pay in the same as the people in California, I would want them to have the same benefits that they would have in California. That's the point of having a federally regulated system with those guardrails. And you could say socioeconomic conditions. Well, the whole idea is to rebalance those socioeconomic conditions through regulation. That's where we need to shift our thought processes. People say it can't work because that's the way things are now. Well, the whole point is to change the way things are. So again,
And so
like
the
who's to
question may
say?
be,
Sorry, go ahead.
like Patrick asked in the chat, is it even allowed to work there? Well, that's the answer isn't even no. It's nobody's tried. Like, we've never tried to make it work there because we've always said no, it shouldn't or can't, because we've allowed states to use things like right to work as an excuse to push back on democratic, socialist, or even social democracy policies. And the real answer to the question is, could it work in Tulsa, is yes, it absolutely can. Do you know how I know it can work in Tulsa? Because we have democratic socialist systems here in Arkansas, in my state where I live, in the home of Walmart. We have somebody who gives back on a socialist scale and donates a ton. And yes, it is from the Walton family, and I'm going to give them props for this, is they donate a shitload to the Bentonville community and offer free museum services. And there's a museum that everyone has free access to. It's called Crystal Bridges. They feature local artists in Crystal Bridge, and it's all free forever for the next 100 years too. The Walton family, whoever the heir is that is actually currently managing it, it's not one of the main Walton folks, but it's one of the kids who's like more socially conscious and actually trying to do some of the good things that robber barons used to do. Is For the next 100 years, it's fully funded for public access for free for anybody to be able to go in and out of the museum, and they can get whatever artist basically that they want. Sometimes they'll have a paid section for like a special featured artist, but it's very inexpensive and anybody can access it. So yes, social democracy systems can work. We just need to regulate them to work as the federal system. The thing is, we keep seeing too loosely the union of states. We have decided that the union of states does not allow us to always regulatorily control what states do. And on a global scale, on a national, at least on a national scale, there has to be a unified regulatory system that the states would follow that encourages and enables social democracy. Like, Tulsa shouldn't just have it, but they deserve it. And in fact, Tulsa has some very beautiful social democracy that works, or democratic socialism that works, because Oklahoma still pays for state parks. Oklahoma has state highways and state paid roads. Oklahoma has fire departments and ambulance services and police departments. All of those are social democratic programs.
We're so close. We're so close. That's the thing people don't understand, is we're so close, like, to what we need. The missing factor is market regulation and to tax the billionaires. Like, we could be there within 2 years. You have a functional Congress. You have a Supreme Court that's willing to do its job. You have a president who's not an autocrat. And then you can get there in 2 years. You put real legislators in Congress and in the Senate who pass legislation. You negotiate with the states, because here's the thing. People don't want a socialist system because they think the government, because they've been convinced it's communism. The Red Scare really benefited them in that sense.
Yeah.
And you have to wonder why they did it so much. Because if they were able to push this hatred of communism and then shift it to say, oh, well, socialism always is communism. Okay, well, one could say that socialism is also capitalism. Okay, because socialism is that point where things work, but ultimately we go back to greed, the 1% who are going to fuck it up for everybody. The answer has always been regulation. Nick, you said it. It's because we haven't tried it. It's because they don't want it to happen. Someone in the chat said that they're scared as fuck of what's going to happen. You know, they're scared, you know, shitless that this is what they're going to lose everything, because they will, because they've created a system where they don't, again, it's personal property and public property. We still want public, personal property. Okay. Like I'm still going to want my own car. I'm still going to want to have my own dwelling. I'm still going to want to have my own land. It's not going to change in a socialist system because we had it. We had it without regulation, and naturally through processes that you can point to in countless examples, like we talked about Russia, you went to the oligarchy, you went to the autocracy, because you will trend there no matter what without regulation. You're seeing a democratic backslide across the world. Why? Because capitalism is reaching late stage everywhere. Everywhere. You're even seeing this in Nordic countries, okay? Like but what's taken them so long is that their social contract in those countries, their culture was so primed for those kind of communal values that it just took longer. But it will affect every single country. What America has the opportunity to do is reject authoritarianism, reject autocracy, reject market socialism, and say, actually, this is what freedom looks like. Because the world still will look to America for the model democracy if we fix that. Okay, if we fix that. Yeah. And, you know, Eric, he mentioned in the chat, it's education, and I agree with you. However, we don't have time, and there's no means to educate everybody through a system per se, and then get them to agree. What you can do is get people in charge that are smart, get the regulation in place to regulate the education. And you have to show people that they'll be better off, because all the people who say, I don't want that shit, and suddenly their energy is like, you know, paid for, and they have utilities, they have healthcare, you know, their cancer treatment is paid for, you know, by the government, because everyone pays taxes into a healthcare system that takes care of people. You know, all of our natural resources, they are for profit, but that profit goes to a point. With regulation, you can allow for profit and still pay into the system. Okay. Like that's the thing, since we're talking about socialism as that center point, you regulate that out as far as is functional, and you keep it that way. So it's
a wealth minimum and a wealth maximum.
Exactly.
It's not one or the other. It's both. We have to do both.
Yes.
And that's where all the countries seem to fail up until this point. Some are starting to get it, with universal basic incomes becoming a thing in some of these European countries. They're testing it out in areas. They're beginning this path forward, is where you have to have both. You can't have so much greed that the other end of the spectrum is impoverished into death and destruction, because nobody is happy at that point. Regulation is a key to all of this, and is incredible is the path forward, and a regulatory body that isn't onerous, but is actually, it's promoting individual business and small business while taking apart the monopolies that have come out of everything. And it is redistributing wealth and redistributing the hoarded money and the fake money that these people have taken, and giving it back to us through social programs. It's using our tax dollars for good things. It's reminding ourselves that we're worth an investment, and we deserve it. And we should invest in ourselves for now and for the future. And that's what socialism is. Socialism is an investment in yourself, because you're worth it. Socialism is then regulating both ends and saying we find it socially unacceptable that people are super poor and cannot afford to have their Maslow's basic hierarchy of needs met of safe food, safety, and security. Like,
Mm.
boom. If we could meet all of those on a social system, that is healthcare, that is education, that is safety and security. You want a safe and secure place? Fine. We just need to redefine what freedom is. To our current system, freedom is debt. Freedom is the freedom to
Slavery.
get as much debt as you fucking want so you can own everything.
Freedom is slavery.
Freedom
It's literally
isn't
backwards as
debt.
fuck, dude. It's so
Yeah.
backwards. But
Freedom is
so
our tax dollars paying for the social programs and everybody being taxed at a progressive tax rate where the rich actually have to pay real taxes like they used to in the 50s that funded social programs and the health of the middle class that these Republicans so badly want back, but they don't realize that the only way to do that is through taxing these fucking mega corporations and super rich people. And we've just been lied as to what freedom is. We're told that freedom is work and being owned by a company and having to basically be indentured servitude or through indentured servitude through right to work and non-unionized labor. And instead, we could be using our tax dollars and taxing these people to get the things that are actually cause freedom, which is food safety and security, and knowing that at the end of every single paycheck and beginning of every single month, you have more than enough to cover your basic needs. Not enough, not just enough, more than enough, so that you have your needs always met and you're never in dire circumstances. And we can provide that for ourselves.
totally.
We're the fucking wealthiest country in the world. We
Let
can
me
do
take
that.
that one step further, right? Because if you think about like everything Nick just said, okay, about providing those core things, the need for someone to be filthy rich goes away.
Yeah.
If you provide the fundamental basis for comfort. Okay, let's get like simply philosophical for a second. What drives people? What makes them do things? Because we hate to be uncomfortable. We don't like being hungry. We don't like being cold. We don't like being stuck out in the rain. We don't like not having, things, simple comforts around us, not having clothes. We don't like, being sick. Okay, we want to be comfortable. So how do you fix that? So why do people want money? Because our system necessitates you have money to be comfortable. Say you go and create a system where you don't need to have an absurd amount of money to be comfortable. And here's where I say I come in and you talk about, what does that look like? How do you make that happen? Well, it'll never happen. The answer is very simple. You have to create a system that funds itself. You do that with a wealth cap. You allow people to get excess income because you still want that market where people can have ideas and innovate and have that extra money. You want them to have that extra money so they can buy things, but at a certain point, you've made it. Great job. You're paying into the system.
You've won capitalism. Good job.
You
You'll get
won
a trophy.
capitalism.
Yeah, like
GG.
we'll gamify it. We'll give you a fucking trophy, your own NFT card or some shit. You
Dude,
get a
you could
plaque.
get like a fucking. You could get like a check mark. You get a check mark. You're like
Yeah,
you're
your
like
social credit score, you get a big old purple check mark next to. You hit 100% at capitalism. Good
Yeah.
job.
Good job, GG. Good, like you did it. I'm proud of you, buddy. You achieved you made it in America, and now as your reward, you get to pay into the system that that allowed you to be successful,
And
you
ensures
don't get
your
to,
personal safety and your personal wealth remains. Because if you are living in a society where everybody's taken care of, guess what? The crime rate more than likely is going to be near zero. It's going to be near fucking zero because when people's basic needs
or man,
and more are met on Maslow's hierarchy of needs, food, safety, and security are the bottom. After that, once you have a couple other things, your psychological needs met and your basic social needs met, happiness scale goes through the fucking roof and crime goes through the floor. Like crime just disappears because people don't need to commit crimes to feed themselves or to find housing if they have food and housing. It's
Drugs.
like 1 plus 1 equals 2,
Also,
but these people have been convinced that 1 plus 1 equals 0.
yeah. And it's like, let's talk about drugs, right? Why do people take drugs? Okay. There's like some drugs people take because they're comfortable, but hard fucking drugs, heroin, like crack, the stuff that makes you leave reality. Why are they addicted to it? Because
Ketamine.
they're miserable, because they don't have those things we're talking about. I see in the chat, people are talking about, well, you can't overregulate. There's things you should overregulate and things you don't overregulate. Okay. The liberties that allow you to be happy to do those things, but to the fear of overregulation that comes from people who fear being regulated because it will take their wealth. It's part
Yeah.
of breaking our own indoctrination to realize that actually regulation is not the devil. Me and Nick talked about this. It's the solution. And we have opportunities to do all of these things, to accomplish all of these things through regulation. It's not the devil. It's about putting things in place that will work. And then once it works, people will stop being like, oh my God, this is the devil. It's because they don't understand, because they've been convinced, they've been propagandized that it's not, that it doesn't work. And we know that's not the case. We know that if you actually just play, it's the spectrum. You are playing with what works. There's a balance, and every direction you go. I think if you're going to leave with one thing today, I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, Nick, but socialism, democratic socialism isn't a type of governance. It's seeking a balance of what works. And my personal opinion, what I would like you, and why I wanted to say democratic socialism, it allows you to keep your personal property. We don't want your personal property. Okay. I don't want your house. I don't want I don't want to take your money. I just want everyone to have enough so that they can have extra money. And Jeff Bezos doesn't have 14 yachts because he doesn't need 14 yachts when children are starving. Okay. What 14 yachts worth of money that could build real quality homes. And last thing I want to say, because we just went over the hour, but last thing I want to say
I got
about
a little bit of time if you want to go long. I'm
we'll
not
go
in a
over
hurry.
that extra time. But the last thing I want to say here is, because we're talking about a wealth cap. It doesn't work. You're taking away their money. Actually, think about this. Okay, maybe in the beginning, the services provided are not the best. But what you create with a wealth cap, as long as you ensure that money goes back into the system, which we can do with AI, we can put AI in place to regulate these processes to catch people who are greedy fucks, because they will always exist. But AI has this ability to be impartial and watch all of these systems at the same time. AI has failed in a lot of places. They overhyped it. But where it has not failed is data like aggregation and looking at large data sets and drawing conclusions. What is a government on the scale we're talking about? It's data. It's about tracking where the money's going, tracking how these things are going. You get a system that's streamlined, that works, you'll see an exponential curve, because everyone who is successful, that benefits the system. Eventually, the quality of living will reach a point where you see a utopia, because it's everyone it just gets better for everyone. It doesn't get better for one person. The more success people have, the better and more successful the system will be. It's capitalism. Right? Let's just take a line graph, okay? If you just for really simple, capitalism goes like this, okay? Oh, it's going up, it's going up, it's going up, it's going up, and then you get the K curve, okay? The K, that's where you see, it's when you see certain percentage goes up and then the other half goes down. That's what all the graphs look like right now, okay? America's a big old K curve. Everyone's in poverty except for the 1%, which is exponentially growing. What you would see with socialism is that curve would not, a socialist, democratic socialist system, that the type that me and Nick are talking about in this discussion, because again, it's a spectrum, okay? And it's a balance and it needs to be struck, but there's plenty of smart people talking about this. They're being silenced because they're scared as fuck that we're going to take all their money, because we need to take all their money so people don't starve in America, so they can afford healthcare. We need to take these large companies, and there will be a reckoning, because it's too much profit. And that's what we talked about in the beginning. It's about, private property. It's about taking away that profit system. But what I really want to hammer home is that it is a self-sustaining system. It sustains itself
Yeah.
because it will feed itself. And even those Nordic countries, their models don't do that.
Well,
They allow for a certain level of private income. There is a tax, but it does allow. They're closer than anyone has ever been. That is what I'm going to say. But what we need in America is something better. And they are, unfortunately, trending in the wrong direction because even they have too lax of a regulation. And it's okay. Like, it's okay. I think that a lot of these countries, if we set a good example, the people in Europe are going to be like, oh my God, America did that with all those
mhm.
capitalist assholes. They're going to turn and demand a better world from everyone else because that's what everyone has done. We have so much of a groundwork laid here. All we need is the people to actually go in and do the job. And
and
that's it. That's all I got.
and
I'm done ranting.
and
I think I laid it out.
no, I think what it too is, it's also the great starting point for the, I mean, I've talked about it a little bit, is like this idea of a project 2075 is a 50-year plan. Is we're at the stage where AI is still young, and it's being overused and overtaken, or is taking over a lot of stuff, and it's going to overtake a lot of industries that it's not really intended to overtake, but it's going to anyway. What happens next is the question nobody wants to talk about on the Democratic side, at least right now, on like, how do we fix this system? Like, what is the true next step to get past all of this and resolve it? It is a socialist democracy where we have a wealth cap and a wealth minimum, and we redistribute these funds among all of us as participants in the society on a sustained monthly basis. So we all have a universal basic income because all people have dignity and value, and we should be able to live off of that dignity and value that we have provided through our efforts and our labors and our past generations' labors to produce for this nation. And that's the obligation of the nation, is to pay it back to the people through social programs. Is we're at a point where we need to talk about what comes next, and that comes next is like you is a return to some old ideas, but it's some of the things you've a lot of the things you've talked about and we've talked about today, and that gets us over the hump. Because what comes next for jobs, nobody wants to talk about that part, is with AI and even with smart manufacturing and
Smart
advanced.
manufacturing is a big thing that no one is talking about. I
Yeah, like
agree with you
smart
there.
manufacturing. Let's take that. An old manufacturing plant would have hundreds to thousands of jobs. A smart manufacturing plant has tens of jobs. But that's not an issue. That's not a bad thing. It's safer, it's more economic, it's we can make it produce value in a much better way. But if we're going to purposely remove people from the workforce, there has to be something on the other side that can immediately catch them. And that other side to immediately catch them is rich people. Guess what? You have to give over some of that fucking money that you have stolen and taken
98%
from
of your money. Like,
90,
you don't get
like
to keep that shit. Also, if you're a
I'm just,
pedophile and you go to jail, you don't
yeah,
get to keep
all
your
of it.
money. It goes away.
Yeah. Yeah. And
Like,
like,
fuck.
if it, over a, let's say even a stupid number like $100 million is a wealth cap. Let's say stupidly. I don't know why that number, but sure. Make yourselves happy at $100 million.
Mhm.
After that, 99.9% tax rate on
Yep.
every dollar made over. Anything before, whatever your effective tax rate is, sure, fine. But over, all of it goes back into the system. Like you said, it feeds itself, but you're not being punished. Who needs $100 million? Like, what we ask ourselves, I ask myself that a lot, and a lot of people in our community ask that. Like, what do you need that money for? Like, you don't need that money to be happy. You're no longer
They're
happy at that point.
miserable.
You're
They're
miserable.
actually miserable.
Yeah, like what is the like we have probably enough empirical data at this point to be able to just be like, hey, what is the exact dollar value that you go from being a normal person to a sociopath at. And
Yeah.
let's regulate under that, where
Yep.
you're maybe like 10% or 20% less than that value is what our wealth max is. Like that way, nobody can ever personally accumulate enough wealth that it turns them into a sociopath.
Yeah.
Um, but we're not rich, so I guess I'll never understand, because even if I had that kind of money, I would give so much of it away that I would never actually be rich. Like
Yeah.
I would have enough to comfortably live, my family would be comfortable, my kids would have a a small trust fund that they could inherit, because that's what is a good idea financially, is to be able to pass on generational wealth. But everybody should have that access. Like
Yeah.
that's what I want, is
And
everybody to have it.
there's one last thing I think I want to address here, because there's a comment in the chat, and it's one of the core arguments against what we're talking about. And Paul, you bring up a point where it won't work because people feel they work harder and want more. Also, many people think by wealth they can be arrogant and feel superior to others, which is a human flaw. You have to change human problems first. You don't change human problems. Okay, that's the thing. That's the thing I'm trying to hammer here to everybody is we won't change. We won't change. If we were going to change, we would have changed already. That's that 1% paradox. You can't change the 1%. Even if you got to 99% of people, you can't change the 1%. You can't change brain chemistry. You can't change that some people are born a fucking sociopath. It's not possible. The only successful way we make it forward as humanity is we make sure no one's rich enough to be having massive cognitive decline and dementia and have the ability to order nuclear weapons testing. That is how we survive. Okay.
Yeah.
So you don't change, you don't fix people. You can educate people. You can provide all the tools. You can make people comfortable by creating a system that works through regulation. I love what you're saying, Paul, and I do advocate for education and advocating for a better society, trying to give people a better chance. But you don't regulate. You don't change people. We don't change. That's and Nick, I'm going to pass you the ball here in a second because I want you to tackle this as well. But my response to you is that's a great in theory, but we need to be realistic. We have plenty of data, okay, and first person accounts to realize that you're just not going to change everybody. It's not possible. It's not realistic. What you can do is put in guardrails. And Nick, I'm going to pass it over to you.
Yeah, and to push back just a little on another point in the chat too, because I love all the comments in the chat. This helps fuel the discussion. It's fantastic. Is one of them is around like how much maybe that wealth is, because like what is comfortably living in the US, and that does depend regionally. But this isn't, that's so micro. That's so micro in how you're looking at what you're thinking about. Is like we're regionally breaking it down, validating why we cannot do this, instead of asking ourselves, does it matter if $240,000 or even $100 million is too much for the Midwest, or like comfortably living in New York? Or are we just being told that it should matter, that maybe it is okay to live more comfortably in one area because you're choosing to live in a slightly higher priced area, but you can afford it? You wouldn't be without. It's everybody would. No, I understand. We're talking different costs of like housing, land, property, regional costs in general. Yes, Midwest, let's say, is slightly less expensive, but I can also argue that it's not. I can easily argue that it's really not any less expensive, because we have houses worth the same exact here in Arkansas that they are in much wealthier areas, because Bentonville, Arkansas, right nearby, has the home of one of the largest corporations in the world. And so our effective rates are pretty close to a lot of democratic areas and very well taxed areas. It's just our taxes aren't being used for anything good in red states, and they're being mismanaged. more often than not, democratic states are being more used, but that's a different conversation. But the cost sharing part of it is we all deserve to have. That's where the wealth minimum comes in, and that's where we all forget, like, or we don't. Sometimes we frame our arguments in a defeatist light, is because yes, education is huge, and most people are uneducated about these systems, and that's where a wealth minimum comes in, because then we effectively say, what is the minimum that we know that an American could live comfortably anywhere
Yeah.
in the US, not just in one region, not just because you were born in Memphis, you can only stay, let's say, in Memphis or in the South or in those regions. I want someone born in middle of fucking nowhere, Mississippi, to have the same minimum wealth as someone born in New York City, because then their opportunity to equally express themselves as an American and equally achieve the promise of freedom, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness and justice and those things, we equalize that playing field. And like I said earlier in our conversation, crime drops dramatically. Wealth all automatically across the board obviously goes up because you're paying people to live, but crime drops, and then everyone has the opportunities that we all want, and nobody gets left behind. And that hate, the fuel that feeds authoritarianism and fascism and Christian nationalism and these and ultra Zionism and Abrahamic fascism, just in general, the fuel that feeds that, the fuel of fear, disappears when your needs are met. And so, my big thing is, I really want us to stop asking or telling and giving ourselves the why can't we do it, or we can't do it because it's never been done before. And I want all of us to really, really push back on that in our own lives and ask, why shouldn't we do it? Not, it hasn't been done, so we won't do it. Well, it hasn't been done, so why shouldn't we do it? Everything else has failed up to this point. We haven't been successful in making the pursuit of happiness actually a real pursuit. You cannot pursue happiness in this country if you're constantly thinking about food, safety, and shelter and healthcare. The only way to pursue happiness is universal minimum wealth and a universal maximum wealth, so that we all take care of each other and we all feed back into the system. And it doesn't punish greatness, it rewards it, because like all of those who have donated to the Feeding America campaign that we've been doing, you know exactly what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
You give that money back and you feel so fucking good. Your dopamine levels just skyrocket.
Yeah.
Imagine knowing that you've made over $100 million in a year, and all of that extra money is now going back to make sure you're safer and you're happier and you're healthier, but everyone around you is too. Like, I'm not afraid of that society.
Yeah.
That's a socialized democracy. That's Star Trek.
I want to piggyback on what you're saying, because, you're mentioning, okay, well, we have to figure out how everyone can live comfortably. Oh my God, how do we collect all that data? How do we know? AI.
We already have it.
We already have it.
We already have all that data.
Fucking, I'm going to say Grok, but not Grok, because Grok's a Nazi. But Grok, take everything, aggregate it, get me a cost of living based on state, based on all of these things, based on environmental impacts. What does someone need in Kentucky versus what does someone need in California? If you're in a drought state, does everyone need to be given rain barrels and other ways? Do they need more solar? And, in coastal areas, do those communities need to have, government funded wave energy? I saw the coolest thing ever. You have wave energy on all of our coasts. We have so much coastline, and they have a small factory, like a small facility with like 8 of these things that go back up and down, and they can power 200 homes. Okay. Imagine you take all of that stretch of coastline, all that government property, and you build that out. Okay. And then suddenly you take those 8, you make 40. Whoa. Okay. So it's like, there's so many things. And I want to point out in the chat, people are saying also like therapy, people can change. I agree. I'm not saying that not everyone can change. What I am saying is that there is no scenario where 100% of people who are going to exploit others do change. And that's we have to regulate. It's like that rule. One person will ruin it for everyone. They will always. Like, you know, it's like when I worked at you know, Home Depot, you know, and everyone, you used to be able to drive the forklift without someone in front of you, but someone impaled somebody on the forklift. So now you need to have someone in front of you all the time because somebody's going to impale you with a forklift. It's going to happen. Somebody's on their phone and they're going to run over your dog. So you need a spotter. That's reality. And that's where, you know, it can be done. And that's when you, and Nick said it. And I want to reiterate it. There's no reason when someone says, well, you can't because of this, you push back. If there's one thing you take out of this dialogue we had today is you need to push back when they say, well, we can't because today we just went over a ton of reasons why we can.
And why we should.
It works. That's why they're so afraid of Mamdani, because he's going to prove that it works. And the millionaires are all going to run away. No, they're not. Where's Wall Street? Shut up. You know, like, get out of here. And it's more expensive for them to run away than to just sit there and pay 2%. Okay? They have a ton of money. Like, they're going to say this stuff. And if they all get up and go away, okay, you know what? There's a lot of people in New York City. And they all they're pretty much paying the same tax rate anyway. You don't know. What we're seeing is New York come together as a community and want to support each other. It's a cultural shift as well. It's not just a, you know, shift of, you're seeing New York, the city of opportunity, of wealth, of being like a Wall Street millionaire. And you're seeing that city say, you know what, we want to support each other. We want a system that works for everybody. That should tell you more than these everyone's saying, well, the millionaires are going to run away. You know what? Not all of them are. And if, you know, 50% of them run and the other 50% stay, they're still good. You know?
Yeah. I mean,
they're
and
still
50%
good.
more housing, just there's like a 50% of that population's housing just went up onto the market and could be reused for something else, better housing. So sucks to suck, I guess.
Yeah. Well, Nick,
leave. Bye.
Your closing statement, brother. Bring it home.
My closing statement is socialized democracies work. Social democratic systems work. They are not scare words. They are us asking and demanding that our taxes pay for nice things because we're worth those nice things and we're worth that simple investment and return on our investment. So go demand that we get more socialized democratic systems in this country, and don't buy into the fact that we can't do it because we haven't. And maybe we should buy into the fact that we should do it because we haven't.
Beautiful.
And that's my message. And go help us feed America. Support us with donations
absolutely.
to Feeding America too.
Nick,
I appreciate
Nick,
everyone.
send me over the link. I'll put it in the show notes. But yeah, you know, let's end with that. You know, I think that's perfect. So thank you all for joining us today for the dialogue. John Oliver, he'll be back next week. Don't worry. Nick, thanks for stepping in. And guys, pretty, please take this dialogue and go have it with someone else. Hash it out. That's what we need. We need you guys to go out there and hash it out. Next time someone says, well, that's not going to work, be like, all right, my friend, I got some stuff for you here. Sit down, and you know what? It might not work on everybody, but if it works on somebody, that's going to keep going. It just like how we're talking about the economic system is going to feed itself. The ideals can feed themselves as well. So, Nick, thank you so much for joining me today. Thank you to all of the 184 people that I know are going to go out today and have a discussion with somebody else about why, you know what, the ideals of democratic socialism, social democracies, why they can work and why we should try. And last, make sure you go and subscribe to Nick at Sick of This Shit Publications. I have his old picture up. I'm sorry.
I'll send you my new icon.
Okay, for
Don't
sure.
worry, I'll send it over to you.
But you can scan that QR code there if you're in the recording or not. Make sure you go visit Nick, support him. Same goes for me, but you can support him by being a free subscriber, by liking, restacking, sharing, and being there, commenting on his posts. That's a huge way to help him out. And obviously, by being a paid subscriber, it helps keep the lights on. It helps feed his family. And the same applies to me as well. So hopefully you can both support us both. And we'll keep speaking out. We'll keep advocating, and we're trusting each and every one of you to go out and say, you know what? I'm a fucking socialist, and I'm not a communist. I'm a socialist, and you're ignorant. So let me educate you, or fuck off. So with all of that said, thank you guys. Thank you, Nick. And
Thanks, Shane.
burn bright, resist, and we'll talk to you all later.